In this part of Genesis, we're going to get back into the life of Isaac. In the last part of the narrative, we saw that Isaac was born and that he was part of that promise that was given to Abraham and Sarah. And so now they have this child of promise that they'd waited for so very long. And now we're going to come into a testing of Abraham's faith. And this is explicitly set up as a test of faith. But before we jump into that, let's just take a moment to reflect on the value that God has for life. As the God that's a creator, he created everything, but he really makes it important that he sees life as an important thing, that he takes death very seriously, and it's not something he ever wants. We see this come up in the covenant blessings and different places. He tells them to choose life and not death. The ways of death are sin, and so it's continuously this way. So what is God doing here in this test is something that we kind of have to grapple with at times, because he's asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And, we know behind the scenes that God is going to provide a different way. But Abraham doesn't know that. And how is this value system of God valuing life working for Abraham as he's having to go through this whole process of a God that's requiring a child sacrifice, right? Like, this just isn't in the character and nature of God. It's not really in the ways of God, and it's not really towards the blessing or the life that's been given. So again, we see this idea of life and God giving life just continuously. We've seen it through the multiple barren wombs being opened, and with Abimelech's household, with Sarah, and we'll see it again with Rachel. Like, God loves life. He's the one that is seen as the God who's the one who gives children, the one who gives a blessing to multiply and continue to bring life and population to the earth. God is urging the people to live in covenant with him, to have blessing and life. And so, again, the Spirit of God is usually given as the one that's the life bringer, right? We see that in the creation story. It's God who gives this life. And so, again, this whole story is not advocating in any way child sacrifice. Again, like, we're looking at a historical narrative. We are also knowing that God's heart behind the scenes will be revealed at the end and not the beginning of the story. And so that he's asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac is really a test. It's not really a value system of God's to kill people. Again, Sarah and Abraham would have understood that their bodies were dead, in a sense, before they had Isaac. They were unable to have conceived without God's help and intervention. They'd had a lot of years to do it on their own, and they hadn't been able to. And so they see this as God giving this child to them. And this further test is going to really solidify that God is in control of this child's life, that he's the God of Isaac, that he's the one that gave him the life, and he's the one that can take it away, and he's the one that can give it. Again, we see that this test Abraham actually passes really well. We'll see the faith statement in Hebrews 11, 17 through 19, talks about Abraham. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who received the promise was in the act of offering up his only son. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead. So, as Abraham is like just about to kill Isaac, that's when God intervenes. He waits till that very last minute. And we see in Hebrews this extra added commentary that Abraham in that place was believing that he could kill his son and God would raise him from the dead, that this was the promised child, and this child would be alive at the end of this story, no matter what. He didn't know that God would just offer a ram or some other way. But in the midst of the story, this is how Abraham was posturing his heart. So we don't have to guess what was going on. We actually have the writer of Hebrews to tell us in the New Testament exactly what God was applauding in the faith of Abraham. That's why I love the New Testament. It's giving commentary on the Old Testament. And so we know that Abraham has this belief in resurrection, which, if you think about where we are in history at the time of Abraham, there hasn't been a notable resurrection yet. We haven't seen that in any of the narratives. Probably the closest thing is Enoch being taken and walking with the Lord and being taken to be with the Lord. But we haven't seen anyone come back to life yet. We won't actually see that until the stories of Elijah and Elisha later on, when they both raise young boys from the dead. And really, resurrection isn't something that we find out much about until the time of Jesus, and he does a number of resurrections. But it was so far outside of their expectation or norms or thought processes that Abraham even thought that resurrection was a possibility. seems unique. It seems that he had a faith beyond what would even be natural at the time, or even be something to even be believing in, right? If you've never seen something happen before at all, that it would be hard to even be thinking that. Okay. So again, God is going to show himself trustworthy, and all of those value systems are going to be part of this. And so again, Abraham was justified through his faith when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar. He was believing for a resurrection. He was believing for God to work this thing out no matter what, and the covenant would be fulfilled. And so Abraham had a belief that God was faithful and the covenant was going to last no matter what. And so again, he ends up having this be the mark of righteousness over his life. So I'm going to just start reading through the narrative, and we can get through the pieces, but I just really wanted to set that background that God is not a God of death. And he is absolutely out for life and blessing. And that is seen through the end of this narrative. It was never God's intention that Isaac was going to die. He had that plan always in place, that this was just a test. Again, we can't always know that on our side as people. It's kind of like Job. When we read it, we get to see both sides of the story, with Satan wanting to tempt Job and God interjecting and putting some protections around Job of what Satan can and can't touch. But Job didn't get to see any of that. He didn't know what was going on. All he knows is a bunch of his stuff got stolen, destroyed, his children die, horrible stuff happens to him. And he's left kind of guessing and filling in the blanks, which he does wrong. He doesn't quite do correctly. He blames it on God and things, and kind of promotes himself. But again, we don't always get to see both sides of the story. And I think that's what's being shown here is Abraham is going into this with trust. And so in Genesis 22, verse 1, it says, "Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham,' and he said, 'Here I am.'" Okay, this is a test of faith. This is what's Abraham going to believe about God, and how faithful is he going to stay to the covenant and the covenant promises at this point. Again, you would have thought that the test of having Isaac would have been enough. But if you remember, for like 13 or 14 years of that, he thought Ishmael was the promised child. Even to the point when Isaac was about to be conceived, he says, "Oh, that Ishmael would live forever," right? Like he thought, oh, the blessings on him. And so again, they'd had some issues with that part of the covenant. And now God's really testing and making sure Abraham really believes. And so that he can write this down in Hebrews later that, yeah, Abraham really was full of faith. And then verse 2, it says, "Then he said, 'Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you.'" So just a little bit of history here. God's telling him to take him up on top of a mountain. And this Mount Moriah is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem today. And so this is going to set this up as a very important mountain. It's going to be where David and Solomon put up the first temple. It's a place of worship. It's a place of sacrifice, right? And so we're going to see that the whole story of Abraham is foreshadowing what Jesus is going to do. God's going to offer his only son. And in that case, Jesus is going to die. He's going to be offered on an altar. And it is going to bring about an end to the temple sacrifices and other things that aren't going to be needed anymore. And so this Mount Moriah and the place of worship for them long term is an important place, an important site. And so a lot of these places in Israel end up having these longer histories and longer meanings to them than just one-time events. So Abraham is going to do what God asked him to. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off, and Abraham said to the young man, "Stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we'll come back to you." So Abraham voices his faith. Look, I know God told me that I'm to sacrifice Isaac, but we're going to go, we're going to worship, and we're going to come back together. He's coming back resurrected or alive, or something's going to happen because this is a child of promise. And so he doesn't take his servants with him. And again, the thing that stood out to me in this is that Abraham rose early in the morning. And if we saw 2 other stories where the people didn't rise early in the morning, we see Lot, right, and his family hesitating. And to the point where the angels have to take them by the hands and drag them out of the city. Abraham's not hesitating here. He's going early in the morning, and he's doing what God told him to without the hesitation, without those things. We also saw some hesitation in the story of Rebecca when the servant goes to collect her from her family, and her family agrees that she can get married. after that agreement's made, the family holds her back and hesitates, and they can't leave early in the morning. And so as this is being said, you kind of get this sense that Abraham is operating in a different way. Again, that's, I think, just important to show how much faith he's showing already in this story. It doesn't give the age of Isaac here. It just calls him a lad. The last narrative, he was 3. And in the next one, he'll be 37. So you can pick anywhere between the ages of 3 and 37. So Isaac is involved in this story. He doesn't really speak in this story or have a part. This isn't his test of faith. This is his dad's. And again, you would think if he was a little bit older, a teenager or older, and his dad is well into his hundreds at this point, that he could overpower him and, hey, Dad, why are you going to try to kill me? Those kinds of things that a child might be asking here. And so there must have either been some explanation or something going on here between Abraham and Isaac, because Abraham doesn't take help to overpower Isaac. And we're not really given Isaac's perspective in this. So Abraham took the wood and the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac, his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and the two of them went together. But Isaac spoke to Abraham, his father, and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." And he said, "Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" And Abraham said, "My son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering." So the two of them went together. So here we do see Isaac speaking. Isaac starts to question. We see that Abraham's having to tell him there's going to be something provided. We don't know Isaac's age at this point, but Abraham is in charge, and he's taking him with him. And so he's just telling Isaac it's going to be provided. We have everything we need for the sacrifice. And it sounds like Abraham has not told anybody the plan yet, the plan that God told him to sacrifice Isaac. I'm assuming that he probably didn't tell Sarah. I would have thought she would have tried to stop him if he had. "Oh, you're taking my only son to go kill him?" Yeah, that probably wouldn't have gone over really well. But again, her voice in this story isn't put in either. So they continue. So at this point, I don't think Isaac understands the full test that's going on in Abraham's heart. And you can imagine that Abraham is probably struggling pretty deeply over this. But again, Abraham is voicing his trust in God that, "My son, the lamb will be provided, and this is going to work out." And so he's passing this test as they go. In verse 9, it says, "Then they came to the place of which God had told him, and Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son." Now, it says he bound Isaac. I'm not sure that if you do bind a lamb typically for an offering, but it may show that Abraham had to overpower him or something. Again, he takes the knife to slay his son. And so, as a child, this is probably a pretty traumatic thing. In our day and age, we'd probably say there's going to need to be a lot of family counseling after this. Because Abraham gets to trust God, it doesn't mean that Isaac really understands what's going on here. But then the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham. So he said, "Here I am." And he said, "Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And so again, we know that there's an Ishmael, but this is being considered his only son. This is the son of promise. This is foreshadowing for sure the death of Jesus, right? When God does not withhold his son from dying on the cross for the world. But you see in this that God is telling him and changing the instructions. "I asked you to do this thing to bring him and sacrifice him, but really don't do it. Don't lay your hand on him." And this is like, he's got a knife in his hand ready to do this. His son is bound. I can imagine he's probably in great grief. And the angel is calling to him from heaven. And so again, the angel of the Lord sometimes appears in human person form, in some physical form. But in this case, it's just a voice. But it must have been a very clear, probably audible voice. You can imagine that possibly this is the first Isaac is, you don't know what was going on. Maybe Abraham's crying, "I'm sorry, son, that I have to do this." Like, you don't know what he's saying to Isaac in this place. But Isaac might have heard this too. "Don't lay your hand on this lad. For now I know that you would not withhold your son from me." I mean, this has got to be the ultimate test in this whole thing. Like I said, there's been other tests. Would he remain in the land when he's told to, because there's famines and other things going on? Is he going to stay faithful to the covenant on his side? And now this part. And so he does. And so in this place, then after he hears the voice that stops him in his tracks from following through on this, then in verse 13 it says, and Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in the thickets by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, the mount of the Lord, it shall be provided. So the place gets a name, right? We see this many times. Either a child gets a name because of whatever the family's going through at the time, or the place gets renamed because they built a well there, an altar, or God met me here. But this place is a place where God provides. He provides a ram instead of having to kill his son. And so this now becomes a memorial spot that's going to become, like I said, an important part of the history. It's also interesting that God speaks first and then provides the ram. It's not that he looked up and goes, oh, there's another option over there. No, he doesn't even see the other option until this happens. And I don't know how often rams get caught in thickets. I'd have to say somewhat rarely, since you don't go walking through the woods and just see like a skeleton or of a ram like sitting there. But this seems like something God had planned and had really orchestrated and made happen. And then, so he's able to still do the sacrifice. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time out of heaven. Okay, so again, we're seeing how God's communicating in this story, said very clearly. It's a voice from heaven, and said, by myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son. Blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants, as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your descendants shall possess the gates of their enemies. In your seed all the nation of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. So this is amazing covenant reaffirmation. And I sure hope this voice, Isaac could hear it too, because this would probably be Isaac's first interaction with God and his voice and the reality. And he would see his dad's faith for what it really was in this place, that his dad was willing to put action behind the instructions of God. And he would get to see that God had been clearly speaking to his dad. Hopefully some of the trauma of this event he would understand was actually God behind the scenes and not his father. You know, his dad didn't have murderous intents towards him. His father was just trying to be faithful. And in that secured a blessing for him and his children. And so we see this, that the Lord is the one that is saying, you know, I myself am swearing this thing. I'm going to multiply your descendants. And a couple of times we'll see as the generations go on, God will speak back to this and say, because Abraham had faith, I'm still blessing this whole line. We see this even in the Kings. Sometimes it refers back to David and saying, oh, David had faith, therefore I'm allowing this lineage to go on. Otherwise, you know, your faith wouldn't have made this happen, but his faith did. And so we will see that even through Isaac's life in a lot of ways, his faith ends up being a continuation or resting on what his dad did. Abraham had to leave his family and his homeland, where Isaac just needs to stay where he was born and not leave. So there is some things that in the two of their lives that we see this faith continuing from generation to generation, but some of that hard ground of the land and having the child of promise is already set by Abraham. When Isaac goes to have children and it's difficult, he can rely back on this place of faith of his father. And he knows that faith has produced a blessing from God. You know, if you heard the audible voice of God speaking over your father who's just about killed you, like, this has got to increase his faith and his understanding of who God is as a personal God. Okay, so as this ends, they just go back down the hill, the mountain, meet up with the two young men, and they continue home. And now I'm sure that there is probably some family discussion that goes on. I'm not sure how Sarah or others would have taken this, but this would be probably a difficult thing to unpack coming out of this, how shaken maybe all of them still are from it. And so, again, we have a part of the narrative that's going to get into this that just kind of ends this off. It's after those things, we kind of get a wrap up of Abraham's larger family, his brothers Nahor, and just everything going on in that other part of that area, because we need the setup right now, because Isaac isn't married and he's going to need a wife. And so where are they going to find this wife? They're going to go back to Abraham's homeland and get a wife from her people, from that group, because they don't want him marrying from the Canaanites. So we just end this, yeah. So we have the family back in the land of Abraham, right? And they had 12 children. Rebecca is a notable name, and she's going to become Isaac's wife. So that's how this narrative ends, is just a little bit of a family wrap up. And then it continues on, right? And so we jump into Genesis 23, and at the beginning of Genesis 23, again, we're kind of having this family summary continue. It's going to be about Sarah. So we're going to sum up Sarah's life now. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And so Sarah died in Kirjath Araba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So Sarah's 127. Abraham at this point is 137, and Isaac is 37. So I just kind of want to give a little bit of their ages, just so we have a little context. That's why I said when Isaac is weaned, he's 3, and then we have that offering of him. We don't know what age he is. He's considered a lad, and now he's 37, and he's still unmarried. So he's been with his mom. She's passed now, and now they have the burial and those kinds of things. So in verse 3 of Genesis 23, it says, Then Abraham stood up from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a foreigner and a visitor among you. Give me property for a burial place among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. So again, Abraham doesn't own any land. He's been just completely nomadic since he left his people group. And this is going to be the first land that he buys in the promised land. And it's going to be basically a cave or a burial place, so he can bury the dead. And it's going to become an important burial site. It's going to become like the family burial site. So this is a big deal. This is the first land purchase. And it's really not just setting down an altar this time, but putting even more into the land. When you put in a memorial or a grave site, this becomes more permanent. So this is really making this permanent. And so it said, the sons of Heth in this area of Canaan said, Hear us, my Lord, you are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold from you his burial place, that you may bury your dead. So they said, basically, choose what you want. Like, right? We've seen in other places that Abraham had a standing army and other things. Like, he's getting along with the people there. And they're like, this probably seemed like a very small thing, right? Pick somewhere and just bury your people group. They probably aren't thinking like this is going to become part of the mainstay of owning the whole land. Like to Abraham, this is taking the first piece of everything. To them, it's just like, oh, this is a small piece of land. So in verse 7, Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, and he spoke to them. He said, thank you, but I'm picking out the cave at Machpelah. It's at the end of his field. So he wanted to pay for the whole field, full price. And so he's not going to accept a gift. He just does not want this gifted to him from the Hittites. And so he wants to purchase it. He wants to really own it. He doesn't want to just bury them there. He wants a piece of land. So this is really him going out of his way to do this, to make this agreement. So the Hittites answered him, and they go to the gate of the city, right, to make this deal, because that's where you make deals. And he says, no, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field and the cave that's in it. I give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I give it to you, bury your dead. And so they're making this formal agreement. Again, the Hittite offers it for free. And Abraham said, bowed down before the people of the land and spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, if you will give it, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there. He really wants to own this piece of land. And so again, he says that the land is worth 400 shekels of silver. And he kind of goes, what is that between us? Like, we're both very rich men. Why are we even bothering? Just go bury them. And so Abraham says, okay, great. You gave me a price. Here's your 400 shekels of silver. I want to actually own this. And so he does that. So again, it's this field, which is near Mamre, and there's a cave in it, and the trees that are in the field and everything surrounding it were deeded. So he buys a decent plot of land here. And so again, Abraham now owns this. He's done it before the gates of the city. And there's a lot made out of this, right? They're saying this the author is saying this very explicitly to show ownership, that Abraham owns this cave and this burial site. We'll see Jeremiah actually do something very similar in his book. Right before the exile, God will tell him to go buy a piece of land and bury the deed for future generations, because they will come back to this land. So even if Abraham can't own the whole thing right now, he can own one piece that is kind of like that down payment, that starter piece of the whole land. And so Jeremiah, we see, does the same thing. He buys a piece of land right before the exile, knowing that he's not going to be the one living there, right? It's going to be for future generations, to the point where God basically tells him to go put the deed in, bury it in a place that's known, that he can tell people as he goes. When you get back to the land, go dig up the deed. You'll own that land then. And so this is kind of like us putting something in a safety deposit box and just handing the key down a few generations. So you put a deed to a piece of land and nobody lives on it for a while, knowing that right now maybe there's a war or tension in that place, but later you're going to go back because God has a calling on future generations. And so in verse 19, we see the funeral happen. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah, his wife, in the cave of the field of before Mamre, in that area of Canaan. And that's where he decided he wanted this, and he bought it. Again, we're going to see other patriarchs. You can check out Genesis 49 and 50 to see who else gets buried here. We'll get there eventually. But this will become the family burial site, which is really important. Like I said, a family burial site gives this place now a lot of meaning and a lot of centrality to their lives and the generations to come. You'll go back to these places. We'll see that happen, especially when Jacob dies. They have a huge funeral procession out of Egypt to come bury him in this place. And so again, we see that this is becoming increasingly important place in the promised land. And Abraham is really starting to root himself there. He hasn't bought land for himself to actually build a house or anything like that, but we do see that, or build a city or anything. But he does now have this long-term generational burial site. And so again, in Genesis 24, we're going to now get into more of the story of Isaac as we go forward. So that was kind of closing up. We have Abraham's lineage, we have his family system, we have Sarah's burial, and really his faith. And now we're gonna shift to a little bit more focus on Isaac and what's going to happen for this next generation. So all eyes now on Isaac as Abraham prepares him to be the son of promise. So in verse 1 in Genesis 24, it says, "Now Abraham was old, well advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. So Abraham said to the oldest servant of his house, who ruled over all that he had, 'Please put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but you shall go to my country and to my family and take a wife for my son Isaac.'" Okay, so let's just talk a bit. Is Abraham being racist here, or what is going on that he does not want Isaac marrying a Canaanite? Well, the first thing that stands out, and this comes up as we'll see in the history of Israel as we move forward through the different books of the Bible, but every time they intermarry with other foreign women, those women bring the idols and the problems of that nation in. And so what's going on around them is probably terrible, right? We've already seen this in the story of Lot. There was just injustices, and they weren't treating the poor right. They were doing things, and it's evil what's going on in these cities around them. And Abraham's like, I don't want him intermarrying, and I don't want him coming into covenant with the people here. We're supposed to take this land, not really be absorbed into it. We're not supposed to come into covenant with people like that. They can be our allies at times, but they're not supposed to become our family. And so again, there also was this separation, right? Because the Canaanites were of the line of Ham, Abraham was of the line of Seth. And so there's kind of this idea already of let's keep it in the family. Let's keep this more in our value system. So Abraham has this idea, probably the best thing to do is send my servant, his main servant, like his butler, right? Would be our idea here. He's going to swear to me. He's going to be the one to set up and arrange the marriage, right? Because Abraham's quite old at this point. He's 137 years old. And so being that age, he probably can't get around very easily, see possibly, whatever's going on. And so he's going to send this servant to go find a wife for Isaac. Again, they just were not supposed to be intermarrying with this cursed line at this point. He needed to go back to Abraham's family and get a wife. Abraham had married his half sister, so this was a very notable thing to do at the time. Again, this will be not allowed once we hit the Levitical laws. You're not allowed to marry your sisters. But Isaac was supposed to go marry a close relative. In this case, it's going to be like a second cousin to him. And so, again, we can get into those exact details. You can look those up. It pretty much gives a whole family structure. But he's going to marry a second cousin, someone within the family. Again, this is the family Abraham had to leave. So they are not completely cleaned up. They are not free of their idols or anything like that. But in general, they're of this line of Seth and Abraham's family already. So this is not allying himself in marriage with a nearby foreign and idolatrous people. So the idea is to bring this wife into Abraham's home, so there's transformation when she comes into their home. She's going to come be part of their household and serve their God. So she's going to be leaving as well. So we will see that. And then his servant said to him, "Perhaps the woman will not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I take your son back to the land from which you came?" Good question, right? You want me to go to your family's homeland, pick out a wife out of the cousins and bring one here? Like, what if that's not possible? Do you want me to just take Isaac there? Can he leave? And Abraham said to him, "Beware that you do not take my son back there. The Lord God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my family, and who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, 'Take your to your descendants I give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. And if this woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be released from this oath. Only do not take my son back there.' So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter." So he is not to take Isaac with him. The servant is to go alone and go find a wife. And Abraham said something interesting. The angel will go before you. And the angel he's talking about that he's met has been the angel of the Lord. He is meaning God is going to run before you, that Isaac has to marry. He has to have children, and he needs to stay in the land, but that wife needs to be not from the land. And so, again, Abraham is making this very clear, what needs to happen here. Abraham probably already knows what happened when he tried to have an Egyptian woman have his children. That didn't work out. So for Isaac, he knows there's two things. There's a multiplication blessing and there's a land promise. And Isaac needs to be in the center of that in both pieces. And God is going to make those things happen in Isaac's life. And so the angel, it is understandable to Abraham that the angel is the one that's going to orchestrate this marriage. Okay. And this whole thing that's being said here becomes kind of marching orders for the rest of Isaac's life. He is not to leave the land, and he's not to marry any of the other women. And so again, God's going to go ahead and make this marriage happen and make it so it can stay in the promised land. Basically, God's going to have to go call this woman out to the promised land too. And she's going to have to make that same journey Abraham did of leaving the family and everything behind. And again, you see that Abraham hasn't gone back. He hasn't seen his family. Even when there's famine, that's the one place he didn't go. He didn't go back north. He went south. And so again, we do see that Abraham has been faithful to this. So we'll just say, I'm going to read this because the narrative is kind of interesting at this point. In verse 10, it says, "Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, for all his master's goods were in his hand. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. And he made his camels kneel down outside the city by a well of water at evening time. Then the time of the women to go out and draw water. And he said, O Lord, my master, O Lord God of my master Abraham, please give me success this day, and show kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, here I stand at the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now let it be that the young woman to whom I say, Please let down your pitcher that I may drink. And she says, Drink, and I will also give you your camels a drink. Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac, and by this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master." So we see that the servant of Abraham has been well trained, that to know God and to know that God comes through. And so he's probably heard the stories and been through that whole journey of the conception of Isaac, the offering of Isaac, all the things that get around that household, right? And the servants' quarters and everything else. They've watched the life of Abraham. So there's a lot of people that have been watching the life of Abraham here, and now understand his faith, understand his God. And this servant is just putting out a test, right? Let the first woman who offers me water when I ask for water, that she would be, basically helpful, that I'd have some conversation with her. Let her be the woman. And not only that, but the test part comes, and let her offer to give my camels water. And so that she will not only offer to give me water, but she will offer to water all of my camels. And so this is going to be his test. And if this happens, he knows it's God. He knows for sure this is going to be God. And so I love that about prayer. When we get specific enough to ask God something specific, to know his hands in it, and then see him fulfill it, it gives us great faith to move forward. Because then he's going to immediately need to ask this woman to come back to the land. And he's going to have to do some things that are very forward. He's just a servant there, a very empowered servant. But still, this is a hard thing, right? That was his first question. How am I going to get and convince a young woman to come back with me? If somebody just showed up and says, I'm from your long lost family, and I'm going to take one of your young ladies with me. Like, you're thinking, okay, right. Like, are you going to sell her into slavery? What are you going to do with her? And so there has to be a lot of trust here with him and his request. And it happened before he had finished speaking that, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her pitcher on her shoulder. So this is Abraham's niece, Rebekah. And now the young woman was very beautiful, behold, a virgin, and no man had known her. And she went down to the well, filled her pitcher, and came up. So full candidate. Like, you think the chances, she's a young woman, she's not married, she is exactly what he's looking for. The niece, she's beautiful, like all of these things. And God immediately answers the prayer with the correct young woman coming out. Of all the people, she's one of the 12 children of his brother. She's unmarried in the right age, right? Like, there's only 12 people in the world that are children, let alone that they're female, and she's unmarried, right age, like everything fits. And this is the woman. So this is notable. This servant has just prayed, and this thing has already happened. He's seeing. And the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me drink a little water from your pitcher. So she said, drink, my lord. Then she quickly let her pitcher down to her hand and gave him a drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. Then she quickly emptied her pitcher into the trough, ran back to the well to draw water, and drew for all his camels. And the man, wondering at her, remained silent, so as to know whether the Lord had made his journey prosperous or not. So she offers the camel to water the camels, and she does it, and she's doing this without his prompting. And he is watching this. He's like, that's exactly what I asked, that she wouldn't just give me water, but she would go about and offer the camel water. That's what I asked God for just moments before. She does exactly what he's asked and of God. And then the servant doesn't even know yet who she is, right? He doesn't know that she's the niece and she's the right one. This is a city. It could be any woman for all he knows. So he's waiting. So it was when the camels had finished drinking that the man took a golden nose ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for a wrist weighing 10 shekels of gold and said, whose daughter are you? Tell me, please. Is there room in your father's house for us to lodge? And the servant, so he's giving her gifts. He's pulling out gifts, right? He's like, who's your family? Like, I'm pretty sure here I found the right girl. So she said to him, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, Milcah's son, whom she bore to Nahor. Moreover, she said to him, we have both straw and feed enough and room to lodge. So everything he's asked at this point, she's the right family. He's found the right family. He's just sitting at the city well, and the right girl from the right family comes out and greets him. They've got room for him and 10 camels and probably a whole entourage of people. At this point, the servant should be impressed that he's found the right family. This is Nahor's granddaughter. And again, we have that. Okay, so it's like Abraham's great niece, possibly. A little bit on the family dynamic and tree. Terah had Haran, Abraham, Nahor, and Sarah. And so of the 4 children of Terah, this was Nahor's family line. So Rebekah and Laban are going to be of his line. So yes, I think it is the niece of Abraham here. So his niece, born to his brother, is Rebekah and Laban. And Laban will come in later into the story. So Rebekah, again, the whole family tree ends up getting intermarried, right? Because not only is Isaac going to marry from this family, but then they're going to send Jacob to go marry as well. And so Jacob's going to marry into this family. Rebekah's nieces, Rachel and Leah. And so we'll see that in a different story. But just the family tree, if you want, the course manual has all of this written down, so you can kind of see that. again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can sign up for the newsletter and have access to the course manual. It'll be sent in the next newsletter. So Abraham marries Sarah, Isaac marries Rebekah, and then Jacob is going to marry Leah and Rachel from this family. So they're going to continue to intermarry within the family system. Back then, it may still be that the genetics aren't as degraded yet, so marrying within the family isn't as big a deal. Today, we do not marry within family. We don't even marry first cousins anymore because of genetic defects. And so typically, even within our laws, especially in the United States, you definitely cannot marry a brother or sister, or half brother, half sister, and usually not cousins either, I don't think, first cousins, because of genetic defects and what happens with children. Again, this probably isn't an issue quite yet. And then by Leviticus, there will be rules like you may not marry a sister. Probably very early on, right after Noah and the flood, and right after Adam and Eve having children, they probably were regularly marrying family members and sisters. So at this time of Abraham, this is actually kind of a more noble thing to do, is to marry within your family. Again, not all the same issues we have today. As we know, like in the lineage of England, like a lot of the kings were intermarrying over the last 1,000 years, 2,000 years. And as they did, there was more and more genetic defects and health problems within those kingly lines, like in England and other European nations, because they kept intermarrying so much. Back then, like I said, probably not as much of an issue, but we do know how that works today. And it doesn't usually work out well for the children. And so then this, jumping back into the story now, getting back to, he's met Rebekah. She says, I'm of the right family. He's like, great. He's got all these gifts of gold for her. Then the man bowed down his head and worshiped the Lord. He is in awe. He's like, it's the right girl. It's the right family. It's the right place. Like if this is all working out. Like, can you imagine driving up to a city, trying to find one person in the whole, one family in the whole city, and they're the first people that come out and meet you at the gas station. Like, that's kind of what's going on here. He's out there, and they're the people that just happen to come along. He's like, hey, do you run the hotel in the city? And they're like, yeah, we have plenty of room. Come back. And so he said, blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his mercy and his truth towards my master. As for me being on the way, the Lord led me to the house of my master's brethren. And I love this, that Abraham's blessing and relationship with God is rubbing off on others. They've seen Abraham interact with God. Now they're praying and having their own experiences. You don't normally get to see a servant's perspective in these narratives, but here you do. You get to see him have his own encounter and relationship. It's not a voice from heaven. It's a circumstantial answer to prayer, but it's still amazing, right? He's still getting this interaction to know that this God of Abraham is very real, that he's interacting with him. He's not setting up a covenant or something like that with the servant, but he is there and he is making the way, and he's seeing the faithfulness of God to the covenant of Abraham and how this is coming about. And so the young woman ran and told her mother's household these things. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban, and Laban ran out to the man by the well. So it came to pass, when he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist, and when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah saying, thus the man spoke to me, that he went to the man, and there he stood by the camels at the well, and he said, come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. So Laban is Rebekah's brother, and we'll meet Laban again in Jacob's story. He'll be the very deceptive father-in-law that trades women on Jacob and the wages of sheep, and changes things constantly, and is kind of deceptive and a liar. But he's welcoming this servant in. He's younger at this point. This is his sister Rebekah, and so he's saying, he sees all the jewelry and the gifts that this servant has come. This is a big deal. Long lost Abraham, who took off decades ago, is not only sending a message, but has sent one of his main servants here. Then the man came to the house, and he unloaded the camels and provided straw and feed for the camels and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Food was set before him to eat, but he said, I will not eat until I have told you about my errand. And he said, speak on. So the servants invited, so are the other servants. You have to think, if they took 10 camels, it could have been 10 men or more that went on this journey. So this is an entourage, and they've gone quite a ways. They've been on this journey for many days. And we'll catch that in Jacob's story. I think I put the mileage in there and things. This isn't a short journey. This was a long journey. So this is a big deal. And back then there was no internet or mail carriers and things. So this may have been the first time that the families had been able to interact with a lot of message carrying and things. And so there might be a lot of greetings and catching up on family histories, things that need to be reunited. Again, there might have been some messages going back and forth at times, but between those years that Abraham left. But again, there probably is some catching up. And so he says, I'm Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my master greatly, and he has become great. And he has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old. And to him he has given all that he has. Now my master made me swear, saying, You will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whom the land I dwell. But you shall go to my father's house and to my family, and take a wife for my son. And I said to my master, Perhaps the woman will not follow me. But he said to me, The Lord before whom I walk will send his angel with you and prosper your way, and you shall take a wife for my son from my family and from my father's house, and you will be clear from this oath when you arrive among my family, for if they will not give her to you, then you will be released from my oath. So the servant is recounting this really well. He's saying, Abraham even said, there's going to be the angel's going to go before me. He's going to prepare this. But if you guys don't agree, because this is the way things work, right? Sometimes God's plan, people don't agree with it. If you don't agree with it, then I'm going to be released as a servant from this oath to take this wife from here. But, the best of what his master sent him to do is to come find this wife. And so again, his way is going to, as a servant, is going to be prospered by the angel. Now, the angel is probably not someone that Laban and the rest of this family or Rebecca believes in at this point. They probably don't know God. Abraham had an experience with God. He was told to leave this family. And we'll find out later that Laban and his daughters have idols in the home. And so it does not seem like they ever come into serving God in the same way. And so there's very good concern of Abraham not to allow Isaac to go live with them. And so the servant is being very upfront. I'm going to need to take the young woman, if you're willing, back to the land with Abraham. They've been very prosperous. He's incredibly rich. This is going to be a good marriage for her. It's a good place. And you see very little is being said about Isaac. Oh, Isaac's an upstanding guy. He's great. He's good looking. We don't get any of that. That's not what's being said. It's just said the family's good. It's going to provide for this daughter, and she's going to be incredibly rich and wealthy. And so again, the servant is the one that's relaying this whole message of what's going on. He's explaining that Isaac is also going to be the sole inheritor of all the wealth. So again, very profitable to this family to enter into this marriage contract, not just to the young woman, but to the whole family, to keep the wealth in the family, to see this. And so again, they might be thinking, oh, is Isaac going to come move here at some point? Maybe he'll bring the wealth here, those kinds of things. Or, this is going to be good for our family dynamics. And so again, I just kind of want to stop and just say this. Sometimes the Lord, as Abraham says to this servant, he's going to send the angel to go make all the preparations. You're going to find the right woman. You're going to have, that God moment that she's the right one. She's going to be completely picked out, but you're going to have to go give her an opportunity and that family an opportunity to agree. And they get to say yes or no. And I think we do see this today. Sometimes people come and they'll tell us, oh, God told me I was going to marry such and such a person. I'm like, yeah, that works out if they agree. It may be what you and God have heard or this, but there's another person involved. We see this with salvation as well. I've had people tell me, oh, so-and-so is going to get saved because, I'm praying for them and it's God's heart and will. And I'm like, yes, it's God's heart and will, but they also have to make that decision. I know sometimes God does tell us when something's going to happen in the future and tells us, their heart's going to be inclined to this. But this servant is not guaranteed success here. Just because he's doing exactly what God wants and literally plan A, it doesn't necessarily mean that the family is going to agree or follow through. And we'll see some of that hesitation and tension come up through this narrative. But I say that because a lot of times I think just even in the modern prophetic movement and things, sometimes we think that God is going to override people's wills, and he doesn't. He gives us opportunities. He puts out plan A, spreads it before us and says, hey, if you take this, you're going to be great and prosperous, right? Rebecca ends up in the lineage of Jesus because she agrees to this, because she's a woman that joins in with faith. And so again, that's being offered to her here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out if the people don't agree to it. And so I want to say there's a lot of times where we do see people override the plan A of God many, many times, not just from doing bad things, but just not joining into the plan. And this is going to cost her something, right? This is going to cost the family something. They're going to lose her. They've raised her. They're thinking maybe she can marry a young man in the city. We'll still see her at holidays, whatever that might look like. But this is like, we haven't, like, from what you hear the servant saying, he's giving them a 37-year history of Isaac being born, that he kind of gets, you get the feeling they may not even know. So there may have not been a whole lot of like ideas of like, Isaac was born 37 years ago in my master's old age. Like he is telling them things. So they're not, it's not like, oh, you're going to just come see Rebecca again. Like, you may never see her again. She's going to leave, and this is hundreds of miles, days and days and days of journeying. Like, this may not even be possible. Okay, so again, there is loss, a very real loss that's going to happen here. It's going to be a complete separation for her if she agrees to this. It's going to take a ton of faith and trust, right? She's going to go off with a camel caravan, and they're never going to know her fate ever again. They're going to assume that this guy wasn't lying or trying to cheat them, that he actually has all the credentials and stuff. But again, it's a fully trust, right? Like, I don't know how many of us, we get those emails, a crown prince somewhere around the world is offering you tons of gold if you'll just wire him some money, right? So there are these things that come up in our lives. And so they're going to have to work through this as a family. And so they obviously understand, and maybe they've already gotten some notice or something about Abraham's life and all this is checking out. So they say in verse 32, and the day came to the well and said, oh God. And so, okay, so the servant is going to recount what happened at the well. And he's going to say, I was standing there, I asked God this thing, and then the woman appointed for your son's master, let her be the one that comes. And she did everything. There was Rebecca, your daughter. And so she's the one. He says, I even worship God in that moment, and I bless the Lord of my master Abraham, who had led me in the way of truth to take the daughter of my master's brother for his son. So he's saying, I have confirmation. I've even worshiped God over this. This is set for me. But now how are you gonna respond? And he says, now if you will deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me. And if not, tell me that I may turn to the right hand or to the left. In other words, this is plan A, but I can turn right, I can turn left, I can do plan B, I can do plan C. Like, I have that allowance, so you're not beholden here. Obviously, we're not going to kidnap her and take her captive. So the servant is asking for confirmation from the family if they're going to allow for this marriage. Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, so this is her brother and her father, who have every right in this culture to make this agreement. The things come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you either good or bad. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be your master's son's wife, as the Lord has spoken. So they believe this servant, that this is from the Lord, that he's been led there by the Lord. Again, they probably were idolatrous. They probably didn't serve God, but they find this supernatural enough that they cannot speak good or bad, meaning they can't discern this. They don't know this God probably, and they're just going to have to take the servant's word for it. But it sounds good to them. Again, there's also some wealth involved here, and it seems like this is going to be a good family thing anyway. So again, the father and the brother are the ones that are being consulted, and they're going to agree to this. And they're the first ones that have to agree. There's actually going to be a number of people that need to agree to a wedding back then. The family did, the woman did, all of these things. And so it came to pass when Abraham's servant heard their words that he worshiped the Lord, bowing himself to the earth. Okay, he's hit the first major hurdle. The dad and the brother are in. Then the servant brought out jewelry of silver, jewelry of gold, and clothing, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. So again, gift giving, just a huge amount of stuff. They're seeing the wealth he's brought. They're seeing that this is legitimate, that this is beyond just trying, to buy a slave girl or something like that. This is well beyond that. These are gifts of gold and silver, and jewelry and clothing, and she's going to be treated well. That's the other thing this is showing, that she's going to kind of be given this princess status in this new family. And he and the men who were with him ate and drank and stayed all night. Then they arose in the morning, and he said, send me away to my master. But her brother and her mother said, let the young woman stay with us a few days, at least 10. After that she may go. And he said to them, do not hinder me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away so that I may go to my master. So they said, we will call the young woman and ask her personally. Then he called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. Okay, so again, I just want to say there was hesitation, right? He gets up early in the morning. The next morning, he's ready to go. The servant's like, let's head home. We came on this huge journey. We've accomplished everything in one evening. We have the marriage proposal all done. We can take care of this and head back. And the family's like, wait a second, we need 10 days. And so this is a hesitation. And, you saw it with Abraham when he got up early in the morning to go sacrifice Isaac, right? There was no hesitation. We see this in Lot. There was hesitation. They got up in the morning. They were supposed to leave the city. They didn't. The angels actually took their hands and dragged them out, pretty much on the account of Abraham's faith. It wasn't Lot's faith. And here, the same thing. The servant's like, don't hinder me. Like, you're making up excuses. I can't just linger here. I need to get back. Like, this is important. And so they said, fine, we'll call the young woman and let her decide. So basically, the family's kind of hedging. The dad and the brother are like, we saw the gifts and all this stuff. But you know what? It's going to cost us something. She's going to leave us. And we'll find later that Laban doesn't let go easily. He sends pretty much an army after Rachel and Leah when they leave. And so they asked Rebecca, what do you think? Where are you at with this? And she says, I'll go. She consents. So this is her saying, I completely agree to this. I was given gifts. I'm going to get a good husband out of this. Maybe she had a calling and pulling on her heart to go where God was going. We'll find out later that she really did follow God well. She was the one that said Jacob needed to be the blessed son. She understood some of that. She and Isaac did pray over the conception of their children, things like that. You get the idea that she does have this relationship with God. She actually has, God speaks to her over the destiny of her two children, even when she's pregnant with them. So again, we'll see that Rebecca ends up being a woman of faith. And so she's getting the same kind of call away from her family that Abraham had. And so again, it's got to be incredibly difficult. This is like grieving the loss of her entire family all at once. This trip has got to be the hardest thing. To trust that the men taking her are taking her somewhere good, that's going to be a good situation for her. She's leaving something very known for something very unknown. And so this is her. I mean, this is one of those things, but at the end of the day, she's really hopeful that she's getting basically this wonderful, rich family out of it. And so they sent away Rebecca, their sister, and her nurse. So they send someone with her. So she does get to take her nurse with her, which is important, I think, for her and the story, just to get the sense that she has somebody. Her nurse will come up again later when they bury her. So again, these servants are incredibly important to the story because they become part of the family and faith story in a lot of ways. And Abraham's servant and his men, and they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you become the mother of thousands and 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them. Then Rebekah and her maids arose, and they rode on the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. So she's blessed. She's loved, she's blessed, and they're going to take her. They really don't want her to leave, but they do let her go. And again, this is going to be her blessing that they give her here is going to be tested, as she and Isaac are going to be barren as well, that she's going to have many children come from her and have multiplication. Like, you can see what's important to them as a family in this blessing too. And then we see verse 62. They get back. Now Isaac came from the way where he was and dwelt in the south. And Isaac went out to mediate in the field in the evening. And he lifted his eyes and looked, and there the camels were coming. He's 37 years old. This is his wife. Or he doesn't know yet, right? He doesn't know if there's a wife involved yet. Did the servant bring back somebody? Then Rebekah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel, for she had said to the servant, who is this man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, it's my master. So she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things he had done. So Isaac is being told the whole story about how the Lord and the servant had interacted through this prayer, how Rebekah had offered the water to the camels unprompted, how that had confirmed everything, how the servant had bowed and worshipped, how he'd given the gifts to the family like was required, how all of this had come together. And now the wife is there. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And you're going to see in Isaac and Rebekah's marriage that it's a pretty loving marriage. I know that we get to the deception part at the end with Jacob and all of that, but we'll even see when they're living in a different land that someone oversees them and says that they were treating each other fondly. Like, you get this idea that just because it's an arranged marriage doesn't mean it's a loveless marriage. They actually seem to love each other. And so Isaac marries her. He loves her. God has arranged this marriage, and the people involved in this arranged marriage are happy with it. They are content and they are in love. And so again, as God has brought this plan A, it's not something being forced. I know from our Western culture sometimes we have these ideas about how marriages work and things, but this is the way that the historical narrative is going here. Again, there's not a lot of commentary. It's just in this case, this is how it worked and this is how it worked out. Again, she ends up following God, and it is God, and it ends up being a wonderful marriage situation. She's richly blessed. They're going to have children, those kinds of things. And so again, we do see this actually kind of more on the fairy tale side of the story, and we don't always get that in Genesis, right? Usually it's not there. There's no trading wives here, or this happening, or backstabbing in this case. Everything comes about. The servant, I think his faith is incredibly important, that he had to stand up against the family when they opposed him. And how many times does that happen? You start on your way. God gives you instructions. In this case, it was Abraham to the servant. But you have your clear instructions. You've had that moment of confirmation with the Lord. That's so clear this is the right thing to do. But then the next morning he gets up and the family pulls back, right? And you get that initial buy-in from the people around you. And then, they step out. They don't follow through on their part. They don't want it. You get that pushback. Are you going to push against that thing and say, hey, I'm going to declare what the Lord said here, and say, you know what, this is still something God wants, and say, no, I really am going to leave. Like I'm ready to go, and we need to go, and if you need to make up your decision. We can't just stay in this place of indecision. And so he pushes that decision to be made, and they allow Rebecca to make it. And so she is the faithful one that follows through on it. But I love the book of Genesis for that. It's a historical narrative, but we see God so involved in the people's lives that we can relate to it, right? Like I said, there's so many takeaways we can take away from the way that they're living this out. The servant's living it out. Rebecca's living this out. How they're having to push against hard times. How these dynamics are coming. I mean, I can't imagine the human aspect of this. Isaac nearly being killed by his father, having to explain to Sarah what just happened, that Abraham even raised a knife against her son, her child. Like having all those family tensions involved. And then coming into this situation where he's sent off on this very long journey to bring back a woman that may or may not come, and having to deal with that family dynamic where they're not totally favorable. They don't really know God. They're not having those encounters. And again, that God really helps direct and helps follow through on everything that they need in these journeys to have the faith and that covenant faithfulness with him. And he meets them in all of these places. And so I think as we're learning from these narratives, it's so applied to our lives. And that's kind of where I wanted to end today, is just with this kind of high note of, the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah. There was faith on both sides, and they were able to enter that.